Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit. We're still in 1963, November 22nd, but we're not looking at the assassination
And
itself. We are going to be looking at some of the research surrounding the assassination.
yeah, some of the really interesting stuff that even people who follow this case, might not be aware of.
Exactly,
Oh.
and today's deep dive is going to center around a really interesting mystery, and that's going to be the mystery surrounding Sylvia Odio
Yes,
and a possible connection to Lee Harvey Oswald before the assassination.
absolutely. A fascinating case, and we'll be exploring that in depth.
Yeah, so our primary source today is going to be Fair Play magazine, issue number 2 from July 1994.
Yeah.
And what I really liked about this particular magazine is that they have excerpts from interviews, they've got articles analyzing evidence,
Right.
and they even have some poetry in here.
Well, Fair Play was definitely known for challenging the official narrative, and so, their take on the Odio incident, I think, is especially interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so for those who need a refresher on the Odio incident, Sylvia Odio was a Cuban exile living in Dallas, and she testified to the Warren Commission that in September of 1963, she had this unsettling encounter with three men that came to her apartment. One of these men introduced himself as Leon Oswald, and the group was basically trying to fish for information and support for an anti-Castro group.
You know, if you're an investigator and you're looking into this case, and 2 months before the assassination, you've got a guy using a name very similar to Lee Harvey Oswald talking about anti-Castro activities, that's got to be a huge red flag, right?
Absolutely.
Especially if you're looking for a conspiracy.
Huge red flag. But the Warren Commission kind of dismissed her account because their timeline had Oswald in Mexico City at the time.
Right.
So case closed, right?
Well, not so fast.
Not so fast. This is where it gets even more complicated because just a week after the assassination, a woman named Lucille Connell, who knew Odio, told the FBI a completely different story. Yeah, Connell claims that Odio actually knew Oswald, that she considered him brilliant, and believed that he was a double agent working to infiltrate Cuban exile groups.
Wow.
I mean, it's a completely different version of the story.
Yeah, it raises so many questions. I
Yeah.
mean, was Connell telling the truth? Was she deliberately trying to mislead investigators? I mean, was she part of a larger disinformation campaign?
And then there's the question of who even is Lucille Connell. I
Right.
mean, our sources describe her as a social worker, a club woman, a friend of Odio's sister.
It's very ambiguous.
It's really ambiguous, and it makes it difficult to figure out, what her motivations were. Was she a reliable source, or was she pushing some other agenda?
Right. Fair play really kind of highlights that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like this whole incident was designed to give researchers headaches.
Yeah.
But somebody who actually tackled this head on was Gaetan Fonzi, who was an investigator for the House Select Committee on Assassinations.
Right.
He really dug deep into the Odio incident, and his take on it adds another layer to this whole puzzle.
Yeah, Fonzie was absolutely convinced that Odio was credible.
Yeah.
Spent a great deal of time interviewing her and actually said that her testimony alone convinced him that there was a conspiracy in the Kennedy assassination.
Wow.
Pretty powerful stuff.
That's powerful. On the other hand, Fonzie had serious doubts about Connell. He described her as difficult to interview and was suspicious of her motives.
Yeah.
It's two sides of the same coin, really, and challenging how we perceive this particular incident.
And Fair Play pushes back on Fonzie a little too. They ask,
Mm.
did he really, you know, explore all of Connell's allegations fully?
Right.
Did he really dig deeper into those claims?
Yeah, I mean, was he so focused on supporting Odio's version of events that he maybe missed something crucial?
It's a really interesting question,
Yeah, it really is.
and one that makes you think.
Yeah. Okay, so we're really starting to see how this, so-called Odio incident, which initially seemed like a fairly straightforward encounter, has really spiraled into this tangled web of, conflicting stories.
Right.
But what makes Fair Play so compelling to me is that they don't just present these different accounts.
Right.
They actually try to back it up with as much evidence as they can.
Exactly. They draw on a lot of different sources to
Mm.
make their case. I mean, for example, they include an excerpt from the FBI report detailing Connell's interview,
Mm.
and they highlight specific allegations that she makes.
Right. And they're not just, cherry picking information to fit their narrative.
Right.
They also bring in Fonzie's book, The Last Investigation,
Mm-hmm.
and, to showcase, Fonzie's, differing levels of credibility he assigns to Odio and Connell.
Yeah.
So they're showing both sides of the coin.
Exactly.
And it goes even further than that. They have a whole footnote dissecting the various accounts of the Odio incident as presented by Fonzie Anthony Summers, Sylvia Meager.
Wow.
It's like they're saying, here's everything we've got, you decide.
Right.
It's a really refreshing approach.
Yeah, it really is.
Especially when you're dealing with a topic as complex and controversial as the JFK assassination.
It's really refreshing. They're not just presenting a single perspective, but they're really encouraging the reader to engage
Right.
and to investigate for themselves.
Be an active participant in the
Oh,
investigation.
I like that.
Okay, so let's dive into some of the specific details that Fair Play uses to try to, poke holes in the official story
Okay.
surrounding the Odio incident. One thing that really caught my eye was the description of the men that visited Sylvia Odio.
Yeah, the descriptions that they get in the FBI report don't match up with Oswald.
Yeah.
One man's described as very tall, another has a very heavy beard.
Right.
And, Oswald at the time was of average height and clean shaven.
I mean, that's a pretty big discrepancy.
A big discrepancy.
It almost makes you think that maybe, just maybe, these guys weren't who they said they were.
Exactly, and that's what Fair Play is pointing out. It casts doubt on the Warren Commission's conclusion
Yeah.
that Oswald was the lone gunman.
Right. They also point out that Odio's sister Sarita was there during this visit and backed up at least some of her sister's claims.
Right. Sarita also mentions seeing a tall man with a beard.
Right.
So now we have two witnesses whose descriptions are challenging the official timeline.
Right. It makes you wonder, why didn't the Warren Commission delve deeper into Sarita's testimony?
Yeah.
It's almost as if they were, just trying to fit the narrative, even if it meant ignoring crucial information.
Right. Fair Play is challenging that kind of thinking.
Yeah.
They're really pushing the reader to look beyond the surface and question the accepted version of events.
Okay, so we've got the discrepancies in the physical descriptions.
Right.
There's another point that Fair Play brings up that I find really interesting. They highlight the fact that Odio had no apparent reason to fabricate this story.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Mhm.
If you were going to make up a story about meeting Lee Harvey Oswald just before the assassination, you would be opening yourself up to intense scrutiny.
Absolutely.
She really had nothing to gain from lying and potentially a lot to lose.
Right. And if anything, coming forward with the story probably made her life more difficult.
Absolutely.
She, became a target of suspicion and scrutiny.
Right.
And there doesn't seem to be any logical reason why she would do that unless she was telling the truth.
So if she wasn't lying, who were these men
Right.
and what was their connection to Oswald?
Yeah.
Fair Play is basically saying, here are the pieces, figure it out.
Right. Right. And then, of course, we have Lucille Connell and her conflicting account. And we talked about this before. Her motives are still a big mystery.
Yeah, Fair Play really kind of digs into this ambiguity. Remember, she's described as a social worker, a club woman, a friend of Odio's sister.
Right.
It's all very vague. Was she intentionally trying to mislead the FBI?
Right.
Was she misinformed? Was she manipulated?
Right.
Fair
Yeah.
Play really asks us to think about all these possibilities.
Yeah. Yeah. And they even go so far as to question whether Fonzie, with all of his meticulous research, actually investigated Connell's claims fully.
Right. They ask some really good questions.
Yeah.
Did he just, accept Odio's denial and move on?
Right.
Or was there a deeper reason why he didn't probe further?
It makes you think, even the most thorough investigations
Yeah.
can have these blind spots.
Absolutely.
And that's why it's so important to constantly, question and re-examine the evidence.
Exactly.
Now, one of the most intriguing aspects of Connell's account is the claim that Odio had told her about this phone call to New Orleans
Yeah.
concerning Oswald.
Right. The one where the person on the other end of the line warned that Oswald was a double agent and shouldn't be trusted.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big detail to just kind of throw out there.
It really is. It adds another layer of complexity
Yeah.
to Oswald's character and his potential role in the assassination.
Yeah.
Was he really just a lone wolf?
Right.
Or was he part of something bigger?
Right.
Was he working for someone, maybe an intelligence agency?
Right.
The implications are huge.
If this phone call actually happened, it really would challenge the official narrative. Yeah.
Of the assassination.
Yeah.
Now, Fair Play doesn't claim to know who made this phone call,
Right.
but they speculate that the source in New Orleans could have been connected to a man named Guy Bannister.
Okay, Guy Bannister. Now, for our listeners who may not be familiar with him,
Right.
Guy Bannister was a former FBI agent who ran a private detective agency in New Orleans.
Okay.
He was known to be anti-Castro and involved in some pretty shady dealings. Some researchers believe he had connections to Oswald and might have even played a role in the assassination plot.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that makes that phone call even more suspicious.
It really does. I mean, we're really starting to kind of peer into this shadowy world of,
Wow.
intelligence operations and covert
Like
activities.
John Le Carre.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, Fair Play doesn't have concrete proof of Bannister's involvement,
Right.
but they present enough circumstantial evidence to raise some serious questions.
Yeah, and that's really their goal, It's
Right.
to encourage, further exploration and scrutiny.
Even if it leads us into some uncomfortable territory.
It's a reminder that the pursuit of truth can be a really messy and complicated process,
Absolutely.
especially when you're dealing with something like the JFK assassination, where so much remains, shrouded in mystery and speculation.
Right.
Man, we have really gone deep, haven't we, on this Odie O'Connell mystery? So many twists and turns. I mean, Fair Play does an amazing job of laying everything out,
Yeah.
but I'm still left with some of these bigger questions,
Well, and that's the beauty of it, right?
Yeah.
It makes you think and makes you want to go out and learn more.
It does.
One of the big questions that Fair Play asks, and one we've been kind of dancing around this whole time, is did Sylvia Odio and Lee Harvey Oswald actually know each other?
I mean, that's the core, isn't it?
It is. It's the heart of the mystery.
Connell claims they did. Odio denies it.
Right.
So much of the evidence is circumstantial.
We've got Connell saying that, Odio spoke very highly of Oswald, and then there's that mysterious phone call about him being a double agent. And, and let's not forget that Odio was connected to these anti-Castro groups
Right.
that Oswald may have been trying to infiltrate.
But it still doesn't definitively prove they had a personal relationship.
Right.
I mean, it's possible that Odio knew of Oswald without actually knowing him,
True.
especially if they were both moving in those same Cuban exile circles.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads us to the next question that Fair Play brings up. Was Odio linked to individuals who believe that Oswald was a double agent?
Okay, so now we're getting into some conspiracy theory territory here.
We are.
Because if those claims from Connell are actually true, that suggests that there were people out there that knew that Oswald was involved in something bigger.
Right. It really changes how we look at Oswald and his motivations.
Exactly. He's no longer this lone wolf,
Right.
disgruntled ex-Marine acting on his own.
Oh.
He's now part of this, complex web, maybe even working for somebody, maybe an intelligence agency. I mean,
Right.
it's huge.
It reframes the whole thing.
It does.
Yeah.
But then it begs the question, who were these people that suspected Oswald?
Right.
What did they know and what were their motives?
Right. It's like peeling back layers of an onion. And every time you peel back a layer, the mystery just gets deeper.
It really does. And of course, we can't forget about Lucille Connell and her role in all of this.
Yeah. I mean, was she part of some kind of disinformation campaign?
Right.
Or is there another explanation for her account?
And that's where things get really murky, I think. Fair play.
Yeah.
They explore this possibility that Connell might have been intentionally spreading misinformation to discredit Odio and protect a particular narrative about the assassination. They even point to her husband, who had a job that took him all over the world. Could that be connected to intelligence activities?
Yeah. It really adds fuel to the fire.
It does. It really does. But the thing is, we don't have any evidence to definitively prove that she was deliberately lying.
Right. It's very possible that she was misinformed, or maybe she misinterpreted what Odio told her.
Right.
We just don't know for sure.
And I think that's what Fair Play is trying to do here. I don't
Yeah.
think they're giving us the answers.
Right.
I think what they're doing is they're showing us how easily history can be manipulated
Absolutely.
and how important it is to be skeptical and to keep asking these questions.
Absolutely. We can't just take things at face value. We have to dig deeper.
Yeah. Demand a deeper level of inquiry.
Exactly.
Now, before we wrap up, there's one more thing that I want to touch on that Fair Play does.
Okay.
In this issue, they actually include a poem
Oh, wow.
called 1963 by Jeff Carlson.
That's interesting. I mean, what do you think is the significance of that? Why would they include a poem along with their investigative journalism?
I think it speaks to their broader message. I think they're acknowledging the emotional impact of the assassination,
Right.
the pain and the anger that still lingers for many people. The poem captures the sense of betrayal and distrust that followed the assassination,
Yeah.
this feeling that the truth was suppressed,
Right.
deliberately suppressed.
Right. Yeah. You're right. I mean, it really adds another dimension to their analysis.
Yeah.
It reminds us that history isn't just facts and dates.
Right.
It's a human story.
Right.
Filled with tragedy and loss and, the ongoing search for truth and justice.
Well said. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, exploring this tangled web of the Odie O'Connell mystery, conflicting narratives, the unanswered questions.
Yeah.
The allure of conspiracy theories.
It's a fascinating case.
It is, and it's all thanks to Fair Play magazine and their meticulous research and their, thought-provoking analysis. They've really given us a lot to ponder.
They really have.
And I hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity to, learn more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you're as intrigued as we are,
Yeah.
make sure to check out the show notes. We've got links to all the source material.
Yes, dive in, form your own opinions, and most importantly, keep asking those tough questions.
Absolutely. The pursuit of truth is an ongoing journey.
It is.
So until next time,
Yeah.
keep an open mind, stay curious,
Yeah,
and never stop exploring the hidden depths of history.
I like that.